Make sure your insurance doesn't come up short. Get gap cover with ALA. For more information, follow the links in the description.
Hello everybody, this has been something of a week of firsts for me. A couple of days ago, I drove my first ever Cadillac. I followed that up with my first ever Durant. And today, I'm driving my first ever Triumph, which I know may elicit many a groan from those who know these cars, but if rumours are to be believed, this is actually a very special car and helped create one of the most significant market segments of the second half of the 20th century. So, is there any truth to that, or is it simply fanboys trying to excuse yet another piece of unforgivable British Leyland tat? Well, find out in today's episode of JayEmm on Cars. This week's adventure, and it truly has been something of an adventure, comes courtesy of my good friend Doug, who has put me up in his lovely Airbnb in the beautiful village of Shillington, nestled on the Hertfordshire and Bedfordshire border, and put me in touch with a number of his local classic car owning friends. And today it's the turn of Mike, who owns both this, a 1974 Triumph 2500 TC estate, and a 1983 Mark I Golf GTI, which he has had from new. This is a more recent addition to the family. He picked it up in 2018, but perhaps most remarkably, it is in fact his daily driver. And so what he's been doing with this car is halfway between a rolling restoration and a little bit of modification, trying to make this a car that he can both enjoy as a classic, but also rely upon as a modern car. But fear not, you won't pop open the bonnet here and see an RB26 or anything daft like that. Most of what's been done here is relatively sympathetic, and the driving experience is still an authentic one. So then, what is a Triumph 2500 TC estate? This car specifically is the Mark II variant of the line, which started way back in 1963 with the Triumph 2000. And this was actually a very significant car, not just for the company, but for the motoring industry in general. You see, only a few years earlier, Triumph, also known to many as Standard, and to some abroad as Standard Triumph, was in a little bit of bother. They had cars, some better than others, but overall sales weren't great, and at one point they were trying to organise a merger with Rover, but that was not to be. And I think it is fair to say that with the 2000, Triumph rather bet the farm, because this car, if it failed, would likely have sunk the company. And one reason I think this was quite so significant is it was the first time that many customers would have seen the Triumph branding on its own. And this was done partly to help them standardise the model range across the world, but also because their previous name, Standard, had lost a little bit of its lustre. You see, previously the logic was that Standard meant the best that there could be. This car was the Standard. However, particularly for American customers, Standard at that point then meant, well, just Standard really. Nothing particularly special. You wouldn't really want to sell a car called the Ordinary, would you? And the 2000 was also competing in a category which historically Triumph or Standard hadn't. It was bigger, more luxurious and better equipped than any car they'd made before, and significantly many other cars on the market. After a somewhat protracted and convoluted development, during which the car went through multiple different iterations, it finally launched in 1963, to great acclaim, pun intended, with the motoring press heralding both this and the then new Rover 2000, aka the P6, as a great alternative for the young executive who wants something a little bit more upmarket, but not dowdy, like an Austin Westminster or, heaven help us, a Princess. Helping cement the idea of this as an upmarket car, the 2000 came as standard with a 6-cylinder, 2-litre engine, hence the name, but there was also a 2.5-litre variant as well. Your entry-level models came with twin carburetors, and at the top of the tree was the 2500 PI for petrol injection. By default, you got a 4-speed manual gearbox with overdrive available on 3rd and 4th, an automatic then being later available. Compared with the Rover, there were 2 major differences. You could get the Rover with a V8, but you couldn't get it as an estate. In 1969, the model was then facelifted and turned into this, the Mark II, which is particularly interesting, for the estate was relatively unchanged. The front end is taken from the then incoming Stag, as are the 14-inch wheels. Numerous other changes were also made to the car, and in 1975 the petrol injection was discontinued on account of the fact that the system was notoriously fickle and difficult to keep working for any period of time. And before you start going, ah yes, typical British car industry, this was happening actually across the board. Early fuel injection systems were just not that great, with even today many people opting to remove them and replace them with carburetors instead. With the PI being retired, the new flagship model was then the S. But there was a bit of a problem. You see, when the car was first developed in the late 1950s and early 1960s, Standard Triumph was its own company. However, by the time this rolled around, the Mark II, they'd been acquired by British Leyland, as had Rover. And this presented a bit of a problem, because now you had 2 models developed entirely separately that shared no parts, both competing for the same market segment. And likely one reason why this car never got a V8 engine, instead having to make do with this lump, which is a bit of a plodder. It makes 97 horsepower here in entry-level 2.5-litre guys, and some torque. It's made of cast iron, though I have to say, I think it's actually pretty decent. The red line is a fairly heady, just shy of 6,000 RPM, and performance, I think, is adequate. With the overdrive engaged, I'm doing now 50 mile an hour at just 2,000 RPM, and it has to be said, this, for its age, is actually a fairly decent and refined thing. Yes, I'm moving about a fair bit, but yesterday I drove a Mini, which is only 1 year newer than this. And by comparison, this really is the luxurious upmarket experience that BL executives would have you believe. Well, those brakes aren't brilliant, has to be said. Discs all round, just not good ones. Visibility naturally is excellent, all of the pillars are paper thin, and of course this car comes in the obligatory brown, which once upon a time the interior was too. Today it is a mixture of leather, courtesy of these Audi TT seats, wood, which is factory correct, and various other stuff too. Luxury cars back then were very, very different affairs. This has the dashboard of the S, so a lot more gauges and things going on. It gives you all the information you want to know. How much fuel I've got, speed I'm doing, and even the speedo is rock solid, not wobbling about as many do. We've got RPM, temperature, and your battery voltage too. Up here in a little aftermarket cluster, we've also got oil pressure and vacuum for the brakes. Gonna keep an eye on that one. What there isn't is any form of power steering, meaning that at low speeds it's relatively heavy. Although to be honest, this week I've driven stuff that's a little bit trickier. This is fine. And Mike does intend to fit a period correct system to this. However, my knowledge of those tells me that he may regret that, because what it tends to do is make these overly light. And believe it or not, this actually replaced a Skoda Superb, a modern one, which he had as his daily driver and dog wagon, hence the need for an estate. This one, with its little quarter lights at the back, keeps the pooch happy, and him too. Of course, by modern standards, it's fairly narrow, which means it's nice and easy to place. It's fairly comfortable, doesn't follow the ruts in the road too badly. Steering is okay, there's a little bit of play in it, but the gearbox is really surprisingly quite good. Pedal feel is pretty decent. The brakes, like I mentioned, they're a little bit, The clutch, I've been warned, may on occasion need pumping, but thus far, it's behaved itself. And, to be honest, from where I'm sat now, this seems like the perfect point from which to relaunch a company. A very well-developed, well-featured car that drives nicely and had, for its day, a little bit of sex appeal too. Perfect. That is why many consider this to be the origin of the modern-day 5 Series, E-Class and Audi A6 segment. The car for your cut-and-thrust executive who's moving his way up the company and getting the attention of his superiors. But, alas, 'twas not to be. Why? Well, the machinations of British Leyland. You see, this had done well, but the Stag less so. It very quickly developed a reputation for unreliability. Triumph also was a company better known for their sporty cars, like the Dolomite Sprint and the TR series, which today is a very good thing, because the popularity of those has meant that many of the parts on this are still available, even if by accident. Though, are you surprised to hear, this is a 50-year-old British car, rust is an issue, in spite of the fact this one was protected from the factory, well, from the dealer. Rust protection was an aftermarket accessory at the time. And that means that if today you find yourself on the hunt for one, you should use CarVertical, the super-powered super search that will cross-reference a number of databases from around the globe to give you all the information you want to know on any potential used car purchase, including previous accident damage, mileage discrepancies, involvement in fire or theft, and, as unlikely as it might seem, usage as a taxi or outstanding finance. It takes just 60 seconds, requires only a registration number or a VIN, and for 20% off the service, don't forget to use my discount code JayEmm. And this did sell relatively well, enough so that it wasn't the final car to bear the Triumph name. Instead, that accolade goes to the Acclaim. Effectively, a Honda Ballade built with Triumph badges and in a British factory. A formula that worked amazingly well, because with that, they managed to exercise all of the demons of British car making's past. We let the Japanese do all the important designing stuff, we just chucked it together. And what resulted was a car that was much improved. But somebody somewhere looked at that and went, yeah, this is a formula that works really, really well. But the Triumph badge just isn't quite as sexy as the Rover one. So we're going to keep doing this, but call it a Rover instead. And with that, the Triumph name on 4 wheels was then laid to rest forever. Today, the rights to it remain with BMW, who I suspect are unlikely to resurrect it anytime soon. And as somebody that grew up in the 1990s, a Triumph was a fairly rare sight. If you did spot them, they were probably very second-hand by that point, fairly cheap, and bought only because people were either, for some strange reason, really attached to them, or that was all they could afford. They were the kind of car that you would have refused if you could, but for the people being offered them, they could not. And so I am genuinely delighted today to be able to say that I've really enjoyed this experience, and I don't have to make any excuses for it. This feels like a very pleasant thing to drive. When you consider its origins are in the late 1950s, it still feels like a relatively modern car, and I can see why Mike has the confidence to daily drive it. Starting it was easy, getting in it is easy. All I'd really want is a little bit of air conditioning. He already has a garage full of parts, including some period correct upgrades, like an S engine, which makes around 108 horsepower, and he is determined to keep working on this, perfecting it, and enjoying it, which I think is fantastic. And so I wish to say a big thank you to Doug for putting me in contact with Mike, and to Mike for giving me my first opportunity to sample a Triumph. A car that I am happy to say I think has earned its name. Don't forget to hit the like button, comment down below, subscribe if you haven't already. I shall see you for the next one. Bye bye.